EVs are just as dirty as petrol cars.
The grid can't cope.
We're too big as a country. How could we possibly get around?
They're not paying their fair share. We have to tax them.
EVs will ruin
to end the weekend. It's not going to tow your boat, it's going to tow your trailer.
So we're here today to bust some electric vehicle myths. Are you ready to do some busting,
Let's
Richie?
get amongst it.
Electric vehicles don't pay their fair share in road maintenance. We need to tax them because they don't pay fuel excise.
Electric vehicles, the ultimate bludger. That is a big fat myth because electric vehicles do pay their fair share because electric vehicles tend to be more expensive, they pay more in GST, they tend to fall foul of luxury car tax, they contribute numerous other ways through registration and every income tax and everything else that an EV driver being an Australian pays, right? Because the way we pay for roads is the money just comes out of a big bucket called consolidated revenue. And the 42 cents on the litre that we pay at the Bowser when we get our petrol or diesel, that just goes into the consolidated revenue. And long ago, that stopped paying for roads. So it just comes out of a big bucket which EV drivers, like any punter, contribute to.
So are you saying that the money from the fuel tax doesn't go into a bucket labelled road maintenance?
No, there is no bucket called road maintenance. There's just a giant bucket that the federal government has called consolidated revenue, and that goes to the states to pay for roads.
And so why is this myth so relevant right now?
It's relevant now because a bunch of states, led by Victoria, are actually bringing in a tax on electric vehicles. And many of those politicians are justifying it by saying EV drivers don't pay the fuel excise because they don't use petrol or diesel. Therefore, we have to charge them a new tax. But what's going to happen is that new tax is going to punish electric vehicle drivers. It's going to lower electric vehicle uptake, and it's going to keep our car fleet just as dirty as it currently is.
And it sounds like the money from the fuel tax revenue wasn't going to road maintenance anyway, necessarily.
No, it doesn't. In fact, we don't actually cover the costs of our roads by anything close to what we charge for petrol or anything else that's relevant, right? If we really wanted to cover the cost of roads, then we'd actually be taxing heavy vehicles because they wreck our roads by a factor of 20,000 times more than light vehicles, than passenger vehicles. So, if you really want to pay for roads, Audrey, you'd be taxing heavy vehicles. You wouldn't be chucking a tax on electric vehicles.
Myth. The electricity grid can't cope with increased EV uptake.
Look, and that myth it's not entirely off the mark because our existing electricity grid can only provide the electricity for our current demand. And we're going to be massively increasing that if we electrify our transport sector. So yes, our fit-for-purpose electricity grid will not be fit for purpose if we change its purpose, right? Which is to power our transport along with everything else that we need it for. But we can change it. Just like we're changing our transport sector, we can change our electricity supply to provide for that. That's entirely possible, and many other jurisdictions overseas are doing that.
Right, and there's opportunities too, right? Because electric vehicles are effectively big batteries on wheels.
Totally. And being here in the Canberra bubble, we know all too well about the opportunities. There's a trial with 50 Nissan Leafs to actually use it as a vehicle to grid. So it's basically like a big battery, these 50 cars put together, and with the right software, you can suck down electricity from these batteries when you need it and then pump it in. So you can do these things. You can work a grid to make these things work. It's not that this is the status quo, it will always be the case. Right? We can change and adapt, and that's the opportunity available to us. And why stop there? Why stop at just enough electricity that we need? Renewables plus batteries are already the cheapest way that you can build new electricity. So let's build more electricity than we need so we can electrify everything, not just transport. That's the opportunity here, not just the kind of limiting ourselves to what is only available now.
So it sounds like the grid can cope, it just needs proper management.
Just need some love.
Myth busted. Dan Bleakley, what a coincidence!
Oh, hey guys, fancy meeting you here.
I know, what are you doing in Canberra, Dan?
Well, I've actually been driving politicians around in my electric vehicle to show them, how incredible EVs are.
Fantastic. Well, we've been busting EV myths this afternoon, and we were hoping that you would be able to help us out a little bit. How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm busting EV myths almost every day, so I'm more than happy to help.
Alrighty. Australia is too big for electric vehicles. There is not enough charging infrastructure.
Yes, I hear this myth all the time, and I actually recently heard it from our Minister for Emissions Reduction, Angus Taylor, who recently said that he wouldn't drive an electric vehicle because he has to travel long distances. Well, last week I did over 2,000 kilometres in 2 days in this car from Mackay down to Canberra. So,
Wait a minute, that means you drove through Angus Taylor's seat, including the main town being Goulburn.
Yeah, I actually stopped at the Tesla supercharging station in Goulburn, and I put 400 kilometres of charge on the battery in half an hour.
Wait, what's the distance between Canberra and Goulburn again?
It's only 100 kilometres, so yeah, I had more than enough charge to get here.
So you would have driven through New South Wales. They've recently just announced a pretty impressive package of electric vehicle policy. What have they said about charging infrastructure?
So, the coalition government in New South Wales just last weekend announced that they're going to be putting a fast charger within 5 k's of anyone living in an urban area like Sydney or Wollongong or Newcastle, and then a fast charger every 100 kilometres on every major highway in New South Wales, which would include Sydney to Canberra through the Federal Highway right through Angus Taylor's electorate.
I reckon that's a myth busted. What do you think?
What do you think, Dan?
I reckon that's absolutely zapped, that one.
So, Dan, why did you start driving miners, coal miners, not those under 16?
My brother's a coal miner, and he just took the car to work for a week and was just showing some of his mates. And they absolutely loved it. And a lot of people in the regions, they really love high performance vehicles. And this is much more high performance than
Whoa!
basically any other petrol car.
Whoa! We ready for another myth? Electric vehicles run from the electricity grid, which is primarily powered by coal, so they're just as dirty as fossil fuel vehicles.
You want to take that one, Richie?
Yeah, I'll have a red hot go.
Yeah.
So this myth has been kicking around a while, which is, aren't EVs just as dirty because they're powered by dirty fuel? And in Australia, that's fair enough, right? We have quite a dirty electricity grid, like 3/4 of our electricity in the national electricity market. So that covers most of the country, the east and southern states. It's mainly run on coal and gas. But that's wrong, because even if you do power it off the dirtiest bit of our electricity grid, being down in Victoria where they use the dirtiest coal, brown coal, lignite coal, it's still cleaner than having a car that runs on petrol.
And it's because they're just a more efficient vehicle.
The Europeans have looked into this closely, and they've found even with a relatively dirty grid, an EV is emitting maybe 1/3 the amount of emissions than an internal combustion engine vehicle, because you're just not using as much energy, and also it's blended. No electricity grid is powered completely from fossil fuels, and that's going to improve the more and more renewables we see come on the grid.
And we know that it is going to, right? We know that the Australian grid is decarbonising. We know that we've got every state and territory with a net zero by 2050 target. We know that they've got renewable energy targets. That's the way that we're heading.
That's right. I mean, as the Energy Minister in New South Wales says, 4 out of the 5 coal-fired power stations are going to close in the next 15 years. That's going to be replaced with clean energy. So the grid is cleaning up, but even now, even the dirtiest part of the grid still doesn't result in electric vehicles emitting more than their oil, their petrol, their diesel-based counterparts.
And then on top of that, not every electric vehicle driver actually charges from the grid, do they? So many of them now are charging from solar panels on their roofs.
Yeah, I think there's even a number around
Around 60%, according to one survey, of electric vehicle drivers had solar panels, and some of those had solar panels and batteries as well.
So you can time it so you can power clean energy straight into your clean energy car.
Exactly, and many people that have electric vehicles know that, and they're doing it already.
And so, at the end of the day, that myth is exactly that, a myth.
Busted.
To add to that, we're currently in the ACT, and isn't the ACT 100% renewable already?
Ooh, Dan, bit of Canberra pride there coming through. That's right. So the ACT was the first jurisdiction outside Europe to go 100% net renewable energy. So whilst Canberra is a relatively small jurisdiction, we can't make all the renewable energy we need right here in the territory, but we're purchasing an equivalent amount of renewables, and we've funded a whole bunch of wind farms and solar power stations like in New South Wales, in Victoria, in South Australia, to make sure that the Canberra and our parliament and our politicians, when they're here, are all working off renewables.
So you're sending a signal to the market, basically.
Yeah, it's a bit of virtue signaling.
Yeah, maybe I'll move to the ACT where they don't tax electric vehicles and actually provide decent incentives for EV owners and kind of reward them for driving clean vehicles.
Oh, you're very welcome. Welcome to join us here.
Look, and it's a good point. Like, transport is about 1/5 of our national emissions, and there isn't a single federal policy to turn that around. So we're really looking at the states and territories to help make that change happen. In the ACT, they're keen to do that. They're putting in lots of charging infrastructure. They're also giving $15,000 interest-free loans for people to purchase EVs or power batteries for their houses or solar panels, whatever it is that you want to do to clean up your carbon footprint. They'll provide you with an interest-free loan. They'll waive stamp duty on electric vehicle purchases, and also they discount rego for the first couple of years as well. Fortunately, we're seeing some other states and territories follow. So New South Wales recently announced that it's going to waive stamp duty as well, and also that it will provide a $3,000 subsidy for cars under 69 grand, at least for the first 25,000 purchased.
And they're going to hold off on the road user charge at least until 2027 or until they reach 30% market share electric vehicles. Oi! Oi!
How's that, Richie? Did you like to do that?
Nah.
Sorry.
No, it doesn't do that.
You can edit that bit out.
Nah, man, you can just put that one in. I'm glad I had a light lunch. That's what I'll say. Audrey, do you want to do the charge?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. All right.
So, how do we do this?
And that should turn blue soon.
Perfect.
That means it's locked in. And yeah, in a minute it's going to start charging.
Great. Let's see how Richie's going.
I actually do feel warmer.
Yeah. Well, that's because the heating turns on when you turn the...
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Barry White should come on soon.
Then it will just stop being a PG film.
Yes, this is the battery pack.
Yep.
And yeah, you can see we're getting almost 800 kilometers per hour
Wow.
charge.
So as we watch this charge, I've got another myth for you. You ready?
Yeah, shoot.
Electric vehicles will ruin your weekend.
Well, ever since I've had this electric vehicle, my weekends have been awesome.
Are you serious, Dan? I'm sure your weekends suck. The Prime Minister has told us as much.
Well, he's not telling the truth because, yeah, I've taken my electric vehicle to some incredible places. I recently took it to a place called Youngala, which is a rainforest just north of Mackay, up in the ranges. The car got me there and back, and I had 200 kilometers left on charge when I got back to Mackay. But
can it tow a caravan?
Electric vehicles are some of the most powerful cars on the road. They'll tow caravans, they'll tow boats. We're currently just near an airport, and if you jump on YouTube, you'll find a clip of an electric vehicle pulling a passenger jet.
A Dreamliner.
A Dreamliner, you've seen it, yeah.
So Dan, you're telling us that electric vehicles are faster, they can tow more, they handle real well. Is there anything that electric vehicles can't do?
Yeah, one of the things that they can't do is produce diesel particulate and carbon monoxide pollution. So there's no... it's impossible for them.
Okay.
There's no exhaust that produced from these cars, which means the more electric vehicles on our streets, the less pollution in our air, and that means that we'll our society will be healthier. People will be healthier. Our streets will be quieter and more peaceful. Quieter as well, which will reduce the stress in our cities.
Yeah, it'll make it a lot more attractive to buy a place on a highway.
Absolutely. I mean, I really feel sorry for people in cities who live on highways where they have higher concentrations of diesel particulate. And, you know, diesel particulate pollution is linked to a whole range of really negative health impacts. So, yeah. Yeah,
there you go. So what do you reckon, Audrey?
I reckon that myth is well and truly busted.
Zapped,
yeah.
Damn.
Navigate to the Australia Institute.
You guys ready for another myth?
No, I'm just reading the points here.
Electric vehicles are for rich people. Affordable models just don't exist.
And you can see where that myth comes from, right? Well, we are in a Tesla.
Yeah, well, I've had this Tesla for about 18 months, but you can get a base model Tesla for around $65,000, and you do get a lot of longevity out of the car. But I understand they're not for everyone.
They're expensive, right? New tech is expensive, just like your new iPhone is more expensive than your old iPhone. But that will come down as we make more and learn more, and the costs of the ingredients of the batteries come down, right?
Exactly. So they're expected to reach price parity towards the end of the decade. The bulk of the expense is in the lithium battery, and those prices are falling dramatically. So they're not always going to be more expensive than the fossil fuel equivalent.
Great.
And regardless of that, there are actually cheap models that are available now. The problem is that we just don't really see a lot of those in Australia.
Because Australia doesn't have any policy, a lot of car makers, they're just not sending their cars here. European cars are staying in Europe where they have much better EV policies.
Is ridiculous, right? Because Australia is a car taker, not a car maker, and so we need to be looking at how we can take the most affordable electric vehicles here. But to do that, we need to attract it. There's only 1%, less than 1% of our new car sales are electric. So why would they bother to send the best and the most affordable cars here? We need to create a market for it. And so how do you do that?
Well, look at a place like Norway. They've created a market. They have a great package of electric vehicle policies, tax breaks, subsidies, and it means that there in Norway you can buy an electric vehicle and it will be an equivalent price to the equivalent fossil fuel vehicle. And we know that here in Australia, most Australians would support a pretty similar policy.
That's right. The Australian Institute has polled Australians and has found that around 2/3 support subsidies to directly lower the price of electric vehicles. In fact, it's slightly higher amongst coalition voters than it is in Labor voters. So we know it's popular. It could be why coalition governments like in New South Wales have just proposed policies to reduce the sticker price, because sticker prices, that price when you roll an EV or any other car off the lot, is what mainly determines whether you purchase it or not.
And on top of that, once you get those EV sales going, you actually get a big second-hand market, right?
And that's where the cheap cars come, right? And if the second-hand market doesn't exist in Australia, it certainly exists overseas. So like there's companies like the Good Car Company that can actually bulk buy second-hand electric vehicles and bring them over to Australia, or you could do it yourself, which I was interested in doing, and I don't recommend it to everyone, but I went onto the Japanese car market and I purchased a second-hand car and got it shipped here and complied here and managed to do it all for a really affordable price for an older model Nissan electric vehicle. So you can do it as well. That's the beauty of basically the grey market, the second-hand market on top of the first-hand market, if that's outside your price range. Because at the end of the day, right, electric vehicles, they're cheaper to maintain, they're cheaper to fuel, and if we can attract the most affordable models here, then they can also be cheaper to buy brand new. And so therefore, households will save money by having electric vehicles, and we should be focusing on that because we're so fixated with lowering electricity prices, but we should be also lowering transport costs, and electric vehicles could do that if we brought them here.
So yeah, what we need to do is accelerate the uptake of electric vehicles in this country, and to do that we need strong government policy.
Well, it's good that we're here in Canberra then.
Yeah, and we're actually just heading down towards Parliament House right now, and we're at the stoplight, so we can actually do some acceleration right now.
Oh.
Ready?
Yep.
Whoa! So are electric vehicles just for rich people?
Well, they shouldn't be, right? And if this government was serious about empowering average households to get EVs, then it would be bringing in policies to make that happen. So let's make sure that they're not just for rich people by getting those affordable EV models here in Australia now.
I call that myth busted.
Done.
Oi!
Sorry, I never miss an opportunity.